I thought we would talk to Syd Fizzard, our reporter, who asked that question to Jason Kenney. And you'll remember that Syd, along with Kian K2 Simone, was down there in Coutts embedded with the truckers for almost the entire time. In fact, I have to check, but it wouldn't surprise me if they were actually at Pastor Arthur's pep talk speech sermon when he was down there. Joining us now via Skype from Calgary is Sydney. Syd, great to see you again. Thanks for your work on this. By the way, where was your question to Jason Kenney? Was it a press conference in Calgary? Was it an online thing? I'm glad you were there. Just curious, where was it?
Absolutely. I forget the exact name of the church, but it was one that we've covered before. They had dealt with some arson incidents previously. It was a small Filipino-Vietnamese church here in Calgary.
Got it. So you were there, and you put the question to him. I saw his answer. I just played it for our viewers. It sounds like he's saying, look, that's just normal. This guy's a petty criminal or a repeat criminal who's incited violence. He belongs in jail. This is normal, rule of law, normal. I don't think there's a bloody thing that's normal about Pastor Arthur. Yesterday, I rewatched his whole speech, Syd. There wasn't a single call to violence at all. In fact, there were 3 specific calls to be peaceful. I think that Jason Kenney is lying about Artur Pawlowski because otherwise it's irreconcilable. Jason Kenney claims to love freedom of religion and free speech, but he's actually got a political prisoner in his jails. If he doesn't lie, something's going to break. Like, it's just, you can't, it's an irreconcilable fact. What do you think?
Yeah, well, no, that's exactly it. And unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to ask about Pastor Tim Stevens or Pastor James Coutts, who have suffered similar fates. Although I guess conveniently with me just asking about Artur, he was able to go down that specific track. But realistically, his investment in religious infrastructure comes at the cost of religious liberties.
You know, that's a great point because although, I mean, they're lying about Artur Pawlowski when they say he incited violence. I tell you, I watched that 19-minute speech yesterday, hunting. Like, I thought, what did he, I was like nervous and embarrassed, assuming it might be true. No, I watched the whole 19, he never once called for violence. He talked about violence being done to the truckers. He talked about the history of Poland and their solidarity movement. It was absurd to say it was incitement of violence. But I'm glad you reminded me of those other pastors, 2 other Calgary pastors, as peaceful as doves. James Coutts, who turned himself in, 35 days in prison. Tim Stevens in Calgary. No one would even for a second think that there's not a violent bone in their body. They're very mild-mannered compared to Arthur. And they were thrown in prison too. Kenney is trying to pretend that this is normal. It is not normal, Syd.
No, that's exactly it. It's not normal whatsoever. And to your point about his speech down there in Coutts, he uttered a parallel speech while we were in Milk River, and we interviewed him there, where, again, he made a parallel speech to the one he made down there in Coutts. And that's exactly what you were saying about he's calling for peaceful resolution. He's calling for peaceful protest. There's nothing that he sees as beneficial from a violent taking back of our freedoms, and he is not advocating for that once that I've seen whatsoever.
Yeah, you know, I knew Artur Pawlowski before this whole thing started 2 years ago. In fact, I did a story about him at the Sun News Network. I'm talking 10 years ago now. So he's like, I can't say I've known him well. But I had an eye on him. I interviewed him before. He was at a weekend event I was at once. So when I say I've heard him talk for 25 hours, I think that's probably accurate. And not just in a burst, like over 10 years. The guy is vigorous in his views. And he's noisy, let's say. And he says we're the lions and they're the hyenas and the jackals. Like, he uses colorful imagery. He calls his opponents Gestapo. And I'll give him a license for that. I mean, the guy comes from Poland, which was under Nazi and then Soviet domination. But I've never in my life heard him incite violence. That's why I knew when Kenney said it, it was a lie that I had to go check. He simply has never in his life said a word to violence. And I think it's a terrible lie. I think he's a political prisoner. I'm really mad about it, Syd.
No, I don't blame you. I mean, I believe the day before, actually, I was speaking with Nathaniel Pawlowski, who reminded me that, today now, I believe it's almost 35 days. So moving forward, he will be the most persecuted of the three pastors when it comes to jail time. And again, with that history, seeing what went down in Poland, I think it's fair to say why he's so vocal about what he believes in is because he's seen this firsthand, and this isn't the first time. So it is a shame, and it's unfortunate that Jason Kenney even said that twice during that answer, that Artur Pawlowski had incited violence or called for people to die on this hill, so to speak, but in a more detrimental way is how Jason Kenney put it. Whereas Artur Pawlowski, hold the line. It's a very peaceful statement. It says, do what you're doing it peacefully, and you should continue doing it peacefully.
You know, Syd, I got to tell you, I'm thinking back 20 years or so, 25 years, to my first day in court as a baby lawyer. I was in criminal docket court in Edmonton, and I was an articling student, as it was called. So there's a pecking order. The Queen's Counsel go first, then the senior lawyers. But that's good because you go last, so you sit and you learn from everyone in front of you. I mean, I didn't really like going last, Syd, but if you have to listen to 90 minutes of court before you get on your feet, that's part of your education as a young lawyer. So I was there for some minor matter I don't even remember. It was my first day in court. But I saw a man get sentenced for sexually assaulting a child. And that sentence, I'm trying to remember the exactitudes of it. After parole, I think that man would be out in like 10 days or something. I think he got 2 months. The reason I tell you that is that Artur Pawlowski and James Coutts, these Christian pastors, none of whom are charged with the crime. The underlying offenses are not crimes. These health orders are not criminal law. And they have served more time and hard time. These are maximum security facilities. They're in Arthur's case, he's still in solitary confinement. I want to tell you, they haven't been convicted of anything yet. They have already served more hard time than convicted sexual assaulters in this country. Now, part of that goes to how lenient we are with sexual assault. But it's shocking that these Christian pastors have spent more time in prison than convicted rapists. That's a fact.
And it's especially unfortunate. I mean, even this reminds me of the beginning of the so-called pandemic. Wherein, especially in the States, we were seeing a lot of sex offenders were just being released for the sake of it, to alleviate the size of those being held in these facilities. And now we're seeing Pastor Artur Pawlowski and other pastors being imprisoned for weeks on end for, as you say, these aren't really crimes that we would expect. These are breaches of the public health and safety acts and orders that come into place. So it's really unfortunate, and it speaks to a sort of flipping of our judicial system.
Yeah. You know, it's crazy. I mean, I remember that Edmonton Remand Center where Pastor Coutts was put. If I recall, they released 400 violent criminals because of COVID, but they put Pastor Coutts in. I want to shift gears. I'm mad about that, and Kenny's lying about it. I think he should pay a political price for it, not just for the lie, but for the underlying political imprisonment. But I saw something on Twitter by the new mayor of Calgary, who's just as bad as the old mayor of Calgary. The new mayor's name is Jody Gondek. And every week, as you know, because I think you've covered a lot of them, there's a freedom protest in Calgary, which you would hope for in Canada's, most conservative city. And they're peaceful. But Jody Gondek, in this Twitter rant, as mayor, now she could say I disagree with him or I agree with him or I'm for them or against them. That's her right. But she talked about policing. And when the mayor says, and we'll put on the screen this series of tweets, when the mayor says, I'm sick of these people, and this isn't a real protest, and they don't have a permit, and I'm sick of this. If she was saying I disagree or agree, that's one thing, and that's her right as a mayor. But when she, as the mayor, basically says, police, I'm furious with you for not smacking some heads like they did in Ottawa, I think she's dangerous. I think she wants to get a bit abusive like the Ottawa police, and that was her signal to one of the worst police forces in Canada, the Calgary Police. I'm worried there's going to be violence at the next freedom protest, Syd, and it's not going to be from the protesters. It's going to be from corrupt cops doing what their political masters say.
Well, and that may even be the case of what we've seen this past weekend, where it was really weird how Calgary Police handled the situation. At first, there was a few individuals counter-protesting closer to the Freedom Rally gathering point, and they got pushed out of the way with bicycles. And then as they slowly approached the counter-protest group, the bulk of them that were blocking the street, the Calgary police basically allowed the Freedom Rally to be on both sides of the police line. Basically, it was the Freedom Rally, it was the police line, it was another police line, it was the counter-protest, and then it was the Freedom Rally again. So they really didn't do a good job at handling the situation. And I don't know if, like, usually the police try and take a tactical style of enforcement where they're trying to do things in a way that is logistically tenable to amending the situation. But in this case, they seem to have been doing the opposite. And it's interesting, though, that Jyote, I'm going to mispronounce her name, but the Calgary mayor, it's interesting that she wants more police enforcement. I think what happened is she saw that Calgary police were using bicycles against the counter-protesters, and she thought, hold on, they should be using these bicycles against the Freedom Rally protesters, which I think is a bit perverted in its own regard. But that seems to be the stand she's taking.
Yeah, it's a lot of bad things are about to happen. I tell you, we've had some atrocious policing for 2 years as police have allowed themselves to run political errands and been turned into mask scolds. Maybe they've forgotten how to do regular police work. I don't know, Syd. I guess my point of my whole show today is that we're not quite out of these lockdowns yet. We're certainly not out of the lockdown mentality. Thanks for going there, and stay safe and keep your eyes peeled this weekend, because I'm worried bad things are going to happen. The mayor basically called for it, and it's on if there is blood, God forbid, it's on her hands. Keep at it, Syd.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's a pleasure, and it's a pleasure to be speaking with all of you.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.